Ever wondered how Italians safely preserve vegetables in oil just like their grandmother did centuries ago? Well, today we're going to dive into a traditional method approved by the Italian Ministry of Health so you can bring the taste of Italy into your home safely and deliciously. Now, alternatively, you don't even need to put these in oil. You could just stick the entire bag in your freezer or in a jar with an oxygen absorber. And they'll be fine to use as is, just to chop up and put ingredients. But Italians, we like to put condiments in it, and then they're tasty in a sandwich or an antipasto spread or whatever. But we do like to preserve it in oil. Preserving vegetables in oil can be risky if not done properly. But don't worry, I'll guide you step by step using this authentic Italian guideline. All you need are your vegetables, some vinegar, and a high quality oil. Now I wanted to just take a minute to show you the different types of tomatoes I have, so that way you can decide what you want to do. So this I purchased on Amazon. Alternatively, you can put these in the freezer or just leave them in the bag as is. It's a big bag, so I would put them in a jar perhaps and put an oxygen absorber inside, or just freeze them. I do have a bag in the freezer that I just take out to chop for recipes. This one I ordered online. This is organic to me. I don't know if I should... I don't see the thing in front of me, but these are organic tomatoes from Turkey. These ones, believe it or not, came from Dollar Tree. Yes, Dollar Tree sells sun-dried tomatoes. These tomatoes here just have, I'm going to show you the ingredients, sun-dried tomatoes and salt. Just tomatoes and salt. This one is also just tomatoes and salt, the one that I showed you from Turkey. And these ones are just ones that I dehydrated in my dehydrator. I put a silica packet in here. They are crispy. So if you dehydrated these yourself, I'm going to show you how to use your own dehydrators. These are cherry tomatoes. So you will also need vinegar. Now, the Italian Ministry of Health suggests wine vinegar, because wine vinegar, I'm going to show you, is 6% acidity. So it's stronger than your typical white vinegar, which is 5%. And they recommend a good quality olive oil. Alternatively, if you don't want to use olive oil, because if you're going to put this in the fridge, it's going to solidify all in one piece, the olive oil. But for shelf stable, olive oil is fine. And the reason why they use olive oil, because olive oil does have some acidity to it as well. By all means, use avocado oil or just standard vegetable cooking oil if you want to keep it in the fridge, because this won't solidify. I'm not sure if avocado solidifies if refrigerated, but I keep my stuff in a cold cellar, and it's fine in my cold cellar. And I don't mind if the olive oil solidifies, because it will solidify in my cold cellar, because that's how cold it is in there. So it's my cold cellar is about the temperature of a refrigerator. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do step by step. Now, before we get into that, I'm going to get into a little bit of a rant here with you. Now, before all of the YouTube people from the US, from Canada, North America in general, that say, oh, you can't do this because it isn't approved, safely approved. Well, I have to go on a little bit of a rant here. Yes, it's not in the USDA book. So in North America, this is a little bit of a rant for our North Americans, Canada, US, before everybody starts freaking out. Sorry, I just ran from downstairs. Sorry, I forgot to put in a mic, so hopefully this sounds better. And do I need to turn this thing on? Nope. Okay, sorry, I just wanted to put a mic on so you can hear me better. So before everybody in North America starts freaking out that it's not an approved recipe, yes, it's not found in this book and it's not found in this book. But I want you to understand the entire world does not go by these books. There's other countries. For example, Canada, we don't have an extension office, but I like to follow the Canadian Extension Office. The American Extension Office. We do have this Bernardin book that has a little bit of pressure canning in it, but not much. I do have the ball one as well. Ironically, it's the same cover. And I also use the USDA book as well for my canning. Having said that, there's many countries on this planet. Every country has their own Ministry of Health and equivalent to USDA or FDA or Ministry of Health, and they have their own. So going by Italy has their own extension offices. They're not really extension offices. I'm not sure how you would translate it, but they have their own Ministry of Health for home canning. So they have their own regulations, recommendations, and things like that. This is one of those recipes. So be mindful. Not everything comes out of the US or Canada. There's other countries that preserve, that their people, their culture, their citizens do preservation at home, and they have their own regulation. All it means is that the US and Canada have never tested this recipe. It doesn't mean it's not a good recipe. It doesn't mean it's not a safe canning. It just means that North America has not tested this recipe. And they can't test every recipe across the globe in every single country. So if you would like to preserve something from another country, say whether it be, I don't know, Poland or France or Spain or Portugal or Greece, Italy, Japan, China, Thailand, they have their own preservation recipes and techniques. And you need to do your due diligence and to read up on them before anybody goes on to other people's channels, which I've seen other channels saying, oh, this is not an approved recipe. Not in the US it isn't. Not in Canada it isn't. But in Europe, it is. So that's my rant. So keep in mind when you go to canning channels and say this is not an approved recipe, number one, you need to do your due diligence. Two, go by regulations. And three, use a little bit of this, because there are some things that I can, for example, this, that is not in this book. It's not tested, but I use my little bit of my brain and say, okay, what is in this recipe? And how can I make those adaptations for me and my family? I do have a background in chemistry. I did study chemistry. I did study biology. I'm also a nurse, if anybody hasn't known. So I would never put anybody knowingly at risk. So for example, in this book, they have a spaghetti sauce recipe that's completely disgusting. I'm sorry if you like it. I don't like it. Italians do not put sugar in their pasta sauce. So I adapt the pasta sauce recipe to how an Italian would make it, not using these guidelines, but using guidelines from Europe, and a little bit of this as well. Okay, so let's get going. We have four types of tomatoes here, and I'm going to address, I'm just putting these books away. I'm going to address each, okay? If I had dried tomatoes here, if you're gonna dry your own tomatoes, you could do this in your oven. Some ovens actually, like my mom's oven, does have a dehydration feature on it. So you can dry your own tomatoes in your oven. You can also dehydrate them. But these are very dry. So these, I would definitely blanch them in vinegar and water. Now the Italian Extension Office says to do 50-50. So I would definitely put them in there so they can soften, because otherwise they are not going to absorb any of the oil at all. Stuff like this one, this organic one that I got from Turkey, this is just dried tomatoes. So I will definitely soak this in vinegar, straight up vinegar, for at least 30 minutes. Okay, now for these ones that already have a preservative in there, these can go straight in a jar. You can also dip this in vinegar, just a quick dip, because they are quite soft and gummy. So I would just do a quick dip, towel dry them off, and then put them in vinegar. Now, the North American Extension Office, the US one, says, see again, I'm mixing and matching because I'm going to use my knowledge and science, not to put any fresh garlic or fresh herbs. I do know some videos that you might see will do that. That is not safe unless they have been acidified. Now, while that is heating up on the stove, go and get yourself some clean jars. Make sure they're clean. Make sure they're sterilized. They've been washed and sterilized for this. So I'm going to put them in these, we call them 500 mils, but I think in the US they call it half pints. I think this is called a pint. So go ahead and get yourselves your jars ready, or have them ready before you start. Okay, so I have half the vinegar, wine vinegar, and half water. If you don't like wine vinegar, white vinegar, etc., go ahead and use the canning vinegar, which is 7%, I believe. Or if you want to be even more cautious, you could just use straight up vinegar. Just heat it and soak them in there just for 3 minutes. We're just going to put them very short time, 3 minutes. All right, so I'm going to put my, oops, making a mess there, not sun-dried, but dehydrated cherry tomatoes in there. And I'm going to put my timer for 3 minutes. Now, the purpose for soaking them, I'm just going to take them out, is to rehydrate them because they're hard as a rock, but also to add vinegar to the flesh. It's going to rehydrate with acid to make them safer to preserve. So I'm just going to allow this to drain on a paper towel. You can do this also on a clean dishcloth. I just want to take off as much excess moisture as possible. These ones that fell onto the counter, I'm not going to be using. And you're just going to pat them down to get, there's not that much moisture in it. And get as much of the moisture out as possible. You can also leave this to dry out for a little bit. as well. So there we go. Again, these ones that fell out, I'm not going to use those. All right, so we're back. I'm not going to use my hands now. I'm going to use a spoon here to get these off the paper. Put that aside. And we're going to put this in this bowl. Now you can pack these and straight up in the olive oil now, right in the jar. But I find to eliminate air pockets, to toss them first and then top them up with the olive oil. Okay, so now the Italian ministry says to use salt. Salt does not preserve, as you know, according even to the USDA, that it doesn't preserve the vegetables. But what the salt does do, it also, going back to chemistry and biology, microbiology, what the salt will do is inhibit the growth of other bacteria. So in a way, it does preserve, but doesn't. It's just going to help inhibit other bacteria. So I'm going to put, I would say this is for a pint. I'd put a half a teaspoon of salt in there. Now, the USDA, some overlap here, and the Italian ministry says only to use dried herbs and seasonings. So no fresh. I know some put fresh, but don't put fresh. We're using our brain here now. We're using the science. So we have some oregano. I'm also going to put some dehydrated garlic, not fresh. Now, some Italians like to put a bay leaf in here. I don't like the flavor of bay leaf so concentrated in such a small jar, so I'm going to omit it. So I just put dehydrated oregano, garlic, and salt. I do not put black pepper. Italians do not put red pepper or hot pepper in this condiment, but feel free to use some if you have it. So now what I do is I take my olive oil and I'm just going to drizzle it, all like I'm making a salad. Now, the reason why I do that is to make sure all the nooks and crannies that are inside this tomato has a little bit of oil in there. And it just eliminates those little air pockets. Because we have some like grooves and folds. And I just want to make sure they're all covered or saturated in oil. Put a little bit more. There's no amount of oil here. Oh, this olive oil smells fantastic. It smells like olives. That's how you know you have a good olive oil. It smells like olives. There we go. So that's all nicely coated. And now I will pack it in the jar. All right, so we're back. If you heard the fan before, I was just boiling my jars so they're nice and sterilized. I like to sterilize my jars the day I use them and dry them off really, really well. This is piping hot jar. So now I'm going to put some tomatoes in the jar like that. Just make sure they're down in there. And then I'm going to top it with olive oil as I go. I just want to make sure there are no air pockets, and this is the best way to make sure that there's no air pockets. So now you can see these guys are submerged in the oil. All those nookie and crannies are covered. So these are the cherry tomatoes that I grew. I hope this fills up a jar, but if it doesn't, that's okay. It's going to be covered in oil anyway. There's no headspace recommendation. You just always want to make sure your tomatoes are submerged. And you can use this oil. Use this oil for cooking or marinating. How delicious would this be to marinate chicken breast in, this sun-dried tomato? Or on top of, drizzled on top of your pasta, like the oil, the remaining oil that's in there. Use it as a salad dressing. Oh, I've used it as a salad dressing. Used it on pasta, salad dressing. This oil, even if the jar is empty and there's oil, I never ever throw away this oil. So I'm going to keep topping this up until it's full. I'm going to show you the other tomatoes. I'm doing kind of like 1 jar of each, so you can kind of get, I'm going to have to grab my other bottle. There you go. Yep. Just cracking open my other bottle of olive oil. Doesn't matter if it's 2 different brands. Top it up. Make sure they're all submerged. Now you don't need any headspace per se, as per the guidelines, but I like to make sure that there's a good generous amount of headspace between the food and the oil. There's a generous amount of headspace there on the top, well, of the oil, between the oil and the tomatoes. Now, at this point, you have preserved sun-dried tomatoes. I would just stick a lid, a clean lid, on this jar. Like that. And this could either go in your fridge, but this is going to go on the shelf in the cold cellar. So that's it. If you feel so inclined and you want to leave them on a shelf, I have a cold area to store it. You can, according to the Italian ministry, you would preserve this. You would boil this jar for 15 minutes. So you would water bath this for 15 minutes. I did not wipe the seal. As you know, with canning, we wipe the seal with vinegar, because I don't need to have a tight seal on this, because it's going to go on the shelf in my cold cellar or in the refrigerator. But if you seal this by water bathing it for 15 minutes, according to the ministry, this is good for 1.5 to 2 years on your shelf. Again, this method can be done with other vegetables, eggplants, zucchinis. You could do mushrooms, again, but you would have to dehydrate them, make sure all the moisture is out, and then you would have to pickle them. Then dry them all off very, very well. Make sure there's no water. If you're concerned, like how I towel dried it, I know that there was no more water on them. If you're concerned, I would stick them back in, if you dehydrate them in the oven, I would put them in the oven again or on your dehydrator just for a few hours, just to make sure that the moisture has fully dried off and what remains is just like the vinegar solution. If you're concerned that you didn't, because they don't have to be 100% dry after you've soaked them, but if you're concerned you want to get some more moisture off, I would stick them back in the dehydrator. Now for the next method. So this is for the homegrown dried tomatoes, if you're doing homegrown. Now, if we're doing store-bought, these have been professionally dried. These tomatoes are professionally dried. There is absolutely no moisture. There is leather. Just leather. Now, my home-dried tomatoes, they were like crispy chips. So I boiled them in half vinegar water. If you have your home-dried tomatoes, and And for those of you in the US, like Arizona or even maybe, I'm not sure, what is the state where Las Vegas is in? Nevada, or any other state where you get really hot temperatures. Italy kind of gets into the 90s and 100s, but it doesn't have humidity. The humidity is very low. So if you live somewhere in the US that is very hot with low humidity, you can definitely sun-dry tomatoes outside in your sun. Okay, so these ones here are professionally dried. They are leathery. You can see they're much darker than the ones that I did at home, and they're leathery. In this case, all I would do, because since they're soft already, all I would do is take the vinegar. Now, if you don't have wine vinegar, don't like wine vinegar, don't have red wine vinegar, use white wine vinegar, use pickling vinegar, use white vinegar for this portion, because we're not diluting it. What we're going to do is just put the tomato in the solution, in the vinegar, 100% vinegar, like that, and we're going to leave it for 30 minutes. So here we go, Dollar Tree sun-dried tomatoes, or if you buy them on Amazon, they're going 100% right into the solution. Let me grab my spoon. Sorry if I say solution, that's my science nerdy bits coming out. So I'm just going to soak these for 30 minutes. I'm just doing a small batch here just so I can show you. The bigger bags of the ones that I showed you, they're fine dried in the bag. I don't have to do anything to them. When I want more sun-dried tomatoes, I have them to make. So I'm just soaking these in the vinegar, and they'll be here for 30 minutes. I would eat this within a couple of weeks. Give it a couple of weeks, just so that the flavors and everything can merge together. So I'm going to take these out of here, put them in the paper towel. Use a clean tea towel. I'm just using paper towel. Again, if you're not comfortable using the half vinegar and half water like the Italian ministry says, and you're comfortable using straight up vinegar, you can do that. Just don't fumigate yourself. Just bring it up to a simmer and just stick them in the hot straight vinegar. Adding more vinegar or acidity to a recipe is fine to do. So I'm going to take this paper towel, and I'm just going to press on them to get all this extra vinegar. Now that's straight vinegar. I'm not going to be too hard pressed to make sure that it's 100% dry or dried off, just because it's 100% vinegar. Take one more. And yes, see how there's not that much moisture coming off of these anymore? I would say that's dry. I'm just going to use the same bowl. It's because we're putting the same ingredients, so we use the cherry tomatoes in. I'll put them all in. There we go. Now again, I'm going to salt. Now the Italian ministry doesn't give you specifics how much salt. They just say it's a good idea because it will prevent other bacteria to grow. Doesn't preserve it, but it will inhibit other bacteria. Dried garlic, always dried. If you see a video doing this with fresh garlic, that's a no-no. We're gonna use our brains. Oh, my oregano is on here. Feel free to put a bay leaf. I don't like bay leaf. I'm just putting straight oregano because I like oregano. And that's what's commonly used. And the oil, generous coat of oil. Just to make sure all those nooks and crannies all have a little oil in there. Now, if you didn't have to do it like this. You could have just layered the ingredients in the jar. But I find that over time, as the oil settles, and then the top isn't covered, but by doing this, I can make sure that they can stay submerged, and this is the way I prefer to do it. Now, also when you layer it in a jar, you can get pockets that's too salty or too much oregano or too much garlic, etc. So this way, just make sure that it's mixed well. So again, I'm going to put a few of these in there. I'm going to say vinegar, oil. I hope you can see. I just poured some oil in there. I'll show you. And then I'm just going to give it a stir, make sure it's like debubbling. There we go. Now, Italians have been doing this for hundreds of years. So I know some people call this kettle or rebel canning or kettle canning, but you have to remember, North America is not the only USDA or Food Preservation Authority in the world. If I wanted to know how to preserve, I don't know, something from Greece, I would go to the Greece, if our USDA hasn't tested it yet. Again, it doesn't mean that these recipes aren't safe. It just means our governments haven't tested it. And I don't think they have the capacity, the funding to do that research. I think they just kind of covered like the basis of what people would can, like in their gardens and things like that. Like meat products, tomato products, the basic stuff. What I would consider basic. Again, make sure it's like I'm debubbling as we go. And I don't fill it with tomatoes right to the tippy top, but you do want to press it down a little bit because that releases any air pockets. And I never fill the tomatoes to the tippy top because I want some of that head space or oil space. I don't want to confuse anybody. Oil space. I'm going to take this off so you can see. And it's just going to be all oil left there. There we go. And now we're just going to get our lid. If you did make a mess, like a big mess, you could wipe the rim, but there's no oil on there. All right. Different types of tomatoes. So this is my homegrown. This is the Dollar Tree one. And this is the one with the preservatives in it from U-Pick. So you can see different colors, but it also could be different types of tomatoes as well. So I'm not really concerned. And this has preservatives in it, so it probably retained the color quite a bit. So, as I said, you can just put these in a cold cellar or in your refrigerator as is for long-term storage, so you can store them for like a year and a half longer. You will want to water bath. Now, if you're leaving yours on the shelf and not in a cold area, you will be water bathing them. And you're going to wipe the rim just like in regular canning with vinegar. You're going to put on your lid, fingertip tight. Them. So you will put them in a water bath and you're going to water bath them for 15 minutes. This is the water that I was sterilizing my jars in, but I'm not water bathing mine because they're going in my cold cellar, but you would water bath yours for 15 minutes and then you can just put them on your shelf. There we have it. So there's the oil in there. So this is our canned sun-dried tomatoes, number 2. This is the store-bought one that I got from Dollar Tree. Now, when you figure, okay, so this was 2 packs of the Dollar Tree one. So let's see. So this was 2 packs for $2. That was $4. So you could do it yourself if you don't want to. You want to make it, but you don't have the dried tomatoes that you've done yourself. But next summer, dry your tomatoes. Now, the USDA says to peel the skin, if you want to do it this way, then dehydrate. Again, the Italian one says it's not necessary, so use your judgment and what you're most comfortable with. But next summer, you pull out your dehydrator and dehydrate some tomatoes, because then, you could have homegrown stuff, just like this one. This is my homegrown one. So this is a mix of grape tomatoes and some golds in here. So anyway, so the store-bought one is 3 ounces or 85 grams, and it took 2 packs to do a pint jar. So you can do the math for yourself, how much tomatoes that you will need. I can't tell you, but this was a lot of cherry tomatoes that I cut in half and I dehydrated. Now, comment below, what's your favorite vegetable to preserve? Doesn't have to be from Italy. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to have more authentic recipes and food safety tips. Ciao! Enjoy!